It's the due diligence processes that have established this. The process of execution due diligence is an ongoing process.
Okay.
The trigger for the commencement of the concession itself, as you are aware, has both condition subsequent and condition precedent. And so that puts in some element of due diligence processes, even during the execution phase. So it is the execution phases that has brought out this particular findings by the agency.
So if I heard you right, we couldn't have actually done this prior to this starting work on March 1, 2019. We couldn't have done that.
Well, because of the timing, you should know that it's not quite easy to have come out with such a major findings. Findings always take time. Due diligence is a process. You might have a signal, but you want to go beyond all reasonable doubt to establish the validity of the signals you have picked. That cannot be an event. That can only be a process.
Throughout this process, the suspension that we currently have, do we know how long it's going to last?
I would not be in a position to tell you today, tomorrow, or next 1 week. Don't forget, when issues of fraud are detected, it goes a bit beyond the ordinary people like ourselves. I'll be presuming that definitely, which of course I know the security agencies will be undertaking further details, examinations, and then to conclude really and establish conclusively that what we are saying, it's really valid.
In fairness to them, could we have actually decided to hold on to the suspension until we finally have evidence in the fullest form to suggest that incontrovertibly these people set out to do this and they ended up doing it?
No, we couldn't have done that, because don't forget, ECG it's a $1 billion company. It has a number of assets, and there's a continuous cash flow that goes through the daily operation of ECG. If we had just decided to wait, nobody knows what will happen during that short period. If it is true, and that this fraud that we're talking about, it's established, and then the agency, which is PDS, knew very well that, yes, of course, we have done that. They can decide to do anything before the suspension. And so government was that fast going in to forestall or to curtail any occurrence of any malfeasance that will occur during these processes. And that is why the suspension.
ECG that needed help.
Yeah.
The ECG that required private sector participation, obviously because there was a problem somewhere. It's the same ECG that's supposed to be running affairs down. Now, many know that essentially cars were rebranded and all of the things were changed. In fact, there are still some stuff of the ECG in the old ECG today. Some have moved into the new PDS. By this suspension, what has really changed? Is it just the top brass that's going to be changed, or there are going to be specific changes across the ECG and current PDS structures?
First of all, let me correct the impression that the coming into existence of this concession and a compact is not just because ECG, in quotes, has been claimed its incompetent or inefficiency have led to some of the costs that consumers are paying. The level of inefficiency that we think occur in the ECG, that is not the final reason why the PDS is coming, the compact is coming to address.
Not because they couldn't collect enough?
Not at all. The compact is also, it's part, but I want to say that we've gone beyond that. The compact has gone beyond that to look at a bigger picture. Most of our infrastructure, as you are aware, there are still several conventional infrastructures that exist, old infrastructures that need to be changed. Transmission lines have been very weak. The bulk supply points, are not very stable. Our metering processes have not been well regulated. So this involves some element of capital injection. So it is just not because of the inefficiency. So for somebody to think that, oh, you are bringing the same ECG back, and therefore the inefficiency is going to continue, I may not be in a position to validate that assertion.
Now, so the question I also asked was whether or not there are going to be massive changes within the current structure of ECG, taking back the PDS used to be part of its unit into a different one.
No, not at all. Don't forget the when this new government took over the contracts from the previous regime, one of the insertion clause was the fact that there's going to be a layout of some of the workers. This government insists that no, the workers will not be laid off. So PDS, as you see, largely is the same ECG workers. Okay. And so I will agree with you, this suspension that we are executing now through these processes, it is the management that we're looking at. And that is why ECG is now coming in. So the workers will remain, collection of bills will continue, maintenance processes will continue, operational activities will be conducted by the same people. But we are looking now at the peak, of the organizational structure to do some changes there by bringing in the management of ECG.
Now, you actually mentioned what is being done. So even though we don't know whether this is permanent or is an interim process that we are actually going through now, what is the mandate given ECG? Continue transformation and reformation of that particular sector, or they have to set out their own vision and work differently from what PDS was doing?
No, during this suspension period, ECG, it's just to come in and stabilize the situation to make sure, as I stated earlier, we have constant supply of power.
Welcome back, and that, of course, was our colleague here, Raymond, speaking to the Minister for Energy. PDS, everybody's talking about it. Contract suspended, and it appears that Ghana has been a victim of fraud. Well, Raymond has been paying attention to all the details and going through the chronology of events, but you have discovered, haven't you, the actual person who is said to have written this letter and forged the signature, thereby creating a security that did not exist.
Yes. So if you go to this is the website of the Alcoot Insurance Grouping. Let's not forget that we're looking for an A+, what they call it, bank to be the one to give us this particular guarantee. The PDS grouping did not get that. So Ghana and the various parties involved agreed that any institution which has credibility can also do the same thing. So we went to Alcoot in Carter to actually get us that. That's when I say we, I mean PDS, not the people of this republic.
Right.
Now, PDS was supposed to get us guarantees because we're talking about almost 17 billion or so worth of assets. It's virtually like if they run away with our money and assets, what is the insurance we have in this case? We went to this company. The PDS went and brought us 2 letters which suggested that, oh, we are in the position to provide the kind of security if anything goes wrong.
Right.
Government then accepted that, and these are very important conditions for you to proceed with it. It was one of the reasons why I agreed, let's proceed with the March event. Let's not forget that when we switched from the 51%, from the 20% ownership by Ghana to 51% locally owned, we essentially sacked most of the people who were in the competitive space for this particular engagement. When we did so, we ended up with only 2 of them. Disqualified the other grouping because they didn't meet some of the standards that we want. So
and
it was
PDS was the only one left.
So PDS became the only one left under the circumstances that we had it.
Right.
So PDS went to this company to go and secure the letters. When they brought the letters, we thought they were okay.
And let's be clear, PDS went to this company after they had failed to secure a guarantee from a bank,
very good,
A1 rated bank.
Yes, see, the bank with the kind of money and the credibility that can meet the standard that the ECG of his assets and money is supposed to be.
Right.
So we agreed that, okay, let's do a compromise. We're just racing against time. So we need to do this as early as possible.
And they did this through some intermediaries, am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the interesting part is that after going through all of this process, 5 months down the line in July, specifically on July 16, the gentleman here, who is the Chief Officer General Insurance, Osman Haq Musa, wrote to Ghana like a whistleblower. He wrote to Ghana to say that you have letters bearing my name as the one signing and giving you those guarantees. Let's be clear, I never signed any of those documents. I did not have the qualification to represent Alcoot in that kind of arrangement. So there is no way I could have been the one who signed it. Indeed, he also suggested to us that the other person who signed your thing is being dealt with. And later on, he revealed that to us. Immediately, Ghana became alarmed. When we became alarmed, we sent our embassy to the political and economic attachments to our embassy to go and verify from this company. The company did not officially open up to us, but we later on found this gentleman who had sent us an email to our embassy and had correspondence with him. He provided the receipt that showed that he sent the letter to We Ghana to inform us about the incident.
Thereby proving his bona fides.
Yes, that okay. I exist. I'm making the claim to you because I know there's a problem. And listen, he also showed the officials of the embassy that this is my signature. What you have there, it's not exactly my signature. So the document you have could be forged. Immediately, that's why we were alarmed. That is why quickly we triggered the July 28th meeting, and that was the biggest people in our energy and finance space. And let's not forget, even though this is pure energy, the transaction really is done by the finance ministry.
That's right.
When it comes to finances and all of that.
And it's almost 18 billion
worth of assets in this particular case. So specifically, the gentleman was supposed to be investigated. Now, government and its officials throughout the weekend, 28th is just Sunday, Sunday, Monday, decided that we needed to do something very quick. That is where they finally believed the man's first story. So they admitted that, well, he exists. He wrote a letter. He works with our crew too. We need to investigate further. But when you suspect fraud, you have to do something quickly.
Yeah.
Because then the entire credibility of the institution PDS was in doubt in this case. Mindful of the claims that have been made by this gentleman, we moved in to now ask them to step back a little bit.
Right.
We had meetings with them, and some of the 28 Sunday meetings, they were in there as PDS.
Right.
Now, we then told them that this is the claim that's being made about your system. Immediately, this is what we're going to do. You have to stay away because, one, PDS are taking over so many things, including billing, metering, and all of the other systems.
That's right.
And it's collecting money. I remember some 5 years ago, for a single week, PDS on the average was collecting 140 million.
ECG 5 years ago.
Yes, ECG was collecting 140 million. That's how serious, on the average, a week. That's how much money they are collecting.
Right.
So government senses that so much money may be in the face of this transaction, really moved in to come and say, no, you PDS, step aside. And this is like top brass, step aside. Let ECG that contracted you, which looks at the official arrangement, be the ones taking charge.
Right.
When they take charge, our final decision will come in. In the interim, we were supposed to send on the 31st a team straight to Qatar to go and conclude with the institution ACUT. One, validity of the, what they call it, document they give us. Two, indeed, if they are still in support, or maybe it could be clerical error or any other thing that happened. So, indeed, if they stand by the letter or are in support of this gentleman's whistleblower act. So that's where the difference came in.
Right.
That team has not left. They are still in this country. We are told that because they have to finalize, get security and the other people on board. And immediately, we also needed locally, since fraud has been alleged, we needed the national security and the relevant security institutions moving to start with their investigations, pick enough evidence so government is assured of what it's really dealing with and the scope of the problem in this particular case. So we are told that in the next 3 days, we'll commence that. Now, at most, in the next 3 months, we would have concluded all of this conversation, even though that cannot be definite because it might exceed that particular time period.
They are aiming for 3 months.
They're aiming for, in the next 3 months, we should have concluded all of these conversations and be convinced that we still have some form of guarantee. We can proceed with PDS, or we need not start any conversation at all because the general principle the minister even mentioned is fraud vitiates all. A contract based on fraud has no basis at all.
Right.
So if the fraud is established, really, we can't proceed with it.
But there is an interesting detail that appears to be clarified by this narrative. So we've heard the energy minister say that this was uncovered because Ghana continued to do due diligence even after the concession agreement was signed. And so he claims that the government of Ghana should be given the credit for having continued to work to uncover this. But what you're describing is a whistleblower, okay, who on his own volition approached the government of Ghana and informed them of an alleged fraud.
And whose status we even have to authenticate later on.
Absolutely.
With our officers.
So does that not contradict this claim that government of Ghana was doing due diligence and uncovered this? Was the information not brought to us rather than us having to go and find it?
What government says consistently is that it's not only about the verification of these certificates. virtually every transaction document ought to be put in the right process of verification. So it was not about this certificate immediately. What they then turned their attention to is when the alert was given on this particular one.
Yeah, so basically they hadn't noticed there was a problem with the document until the individual who claims his signature was forged came forward.
Yeah.
So if he hadn't come forward...
And what they sought to explain was that the finance ministry mostly goes through this process. Mostly we determine integrity, that PDS is verified to our people of some standards and all of that. We know this gentleman, we know that gentleman, we know this gentleman, we've been in this form of dealings and all of that. If we're able to clarify that process, the first thing we do is then say, this is a grouping of some reputation. If we're able to clarify that Akut indeed wrote the letter to us, we don't have a problem. Now, government's main contention is that Akut is not even saying they didn't write the letter. It looks like somebody within Akut might have actually signed on behalf of another person. So as for the letter coming from the institution, is not in doubt.
They believe it came from the institution, which means that PDS had the guarantee.
Very good. So that's what they believed. And in this case, they're even suggesting that it's possible PDS might not have known that the people who did this fraudulent deal, or the person who signed, was not the person who was supposed to sign.
Right.
Indeed, they believed they were operating with the right person. Like we go out there and look for letters of credit.
Right.
You go out there and look for the things that you need to do big ticket transactions. You believe that a person, let's say a big man in the company signed. At the end of the day, until the big man or somebody else comes to tell that this really is not my signature. I didn't really sign this. Somebody else did. You might not have doubts about it. So up until that time, they didn't really start from verifying this gentleman.
Absolutely. Yes. So again, I think the point is made that the information was brought to them, us, not that we did.
And again, we're looking at from March when the actual, and you see the contract arrangements started before March.
Right.
March where the actual arrangements started. And July 16, when he wrote to us and told us that this is where the problem is.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And of course, Raymond continues to give us more detail on this bizarre discovery in the PDS concession agreement with the government of Ghana. Are we victims of fraud? Well, we're about to get to the bottom of that with our guest. Pauline Anaman is the head of the Africa Center for Energy Policy's Policy Unit. And she joins us in just a few moments. Right, okay, so here's Pauline, and very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for making the time to be here. ASEP put out a statement yesterday, very, very concerned about this. Not just this, but also what we heard in the budget about the emergency situation that we have in our energy power sector. But this is troubling, okay? Suspected fraud. Now, I was trying to ascertain when I was speaking to Raymond whether indeed PDS has this guarantee, just that the wrong person signed it and, you know, that's a clerical issue that can be resolved, or whether indeed this sweeps the rug from underneath PDS and we find ourselves exposed.
Right, so this whole thing, first of all, I must say that it's a very unfortunate situation we find ourselves in as a country. And the reason I say this is because we all know the challenges that the energy sector has faced, especially with the utilities and the debts that are raising out of their inefficient operation, and therefore the need for a private participant. But also an important point to make is that it took us 3 years to get PDS into the system.
Right.
That means a lot of resources has gone into procuring PDS. And so for us to come to this point of suspending the contract with a potential with possibility of breaching the contract if it is so established that there is indeed fraud, is quite unfortunate. It speaks very ill of our country. It also speaks very ill of all the parties involved. So it is very, very unfortunate. Now, to the issue of whether or not PDS knew about the document they presented, right from the word go, ASEP believed in this whole private sector participation. We followed the process and we were impressed with the process from the beginning because it was very transparent. We were even on the committee, chairing the committee, but eventually communication dwindled along the way and we couldn't even reach MIDA about our concerns. So we kept writing on what we thought about the processes. Even with bringing in a local partner, nobody knew about the local partner who has a responsibility because they have about 51% shares, which means that if you have to provide guarantee, the local partner would also have to provide 51% of that.
Yeah.
So it means, therefore, that this whole issue about an insurance bond that is deemed or that is suspected to be fraudulent would have been addressed from the beginning if we knew the competencies and capacity of these parties getting into the deal with Ghana.
So what you're saying is you went from chairing the process to not being able to reach MIDA.
We didn't chair the process. We chaired a committee that was set up more like a constituent to represent the various interests.
Right.
Right. So this is MIDA doing, executing a project on behalf of the country, and they know that there are stakeholders involved, and so they put together a committee.
Yeah.
And then the committees come from various constituents. So in order to ensure that there is accountability and there is communication and transparency, that committee was set up. ASEP was made to chair that committee, and eventually communication broke down.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically what we are saying is that this whole situation is as a result of the lack of transparency that we have seen from the process.
Right. So what you're saying is you would have spotted this earlier if the communication had not broken down.
Yeah, and that aside, ECG had been making efforts to, you know, inform everybody involved in the process about potential breaches, but ECG wasn't listened to, and that is also another problem. And we have to note that ECG is basically like a state utility, and they have very huge interest in this. So you remember when ECG staff were agitating about this whole thing. So it is possible that ECG was not listened to because they were seen as, you know, people who did not want the project to go on anyway. But they had valid points that if they had been listened to from the beginning, the issue would have been addressed. And this time around, it is this same ECG that has discovered this situation we are in now.
So who did not listen to ECG? Was it the ministry? Was it MIDA? Who didn't listen to ECG?
So the project was administered by MIDA, and IFC was our financial advisor. And also we have Parliament who went through, who approved the deal. So all these key stakeholders who are key decision makers in this whole project should have paid mind to what ECG was saying, but they didn't.
We're hearing parliamentarians say, oh, we warned them, but the way they rushed us, they made us decide this in one day. We warned them, there were red flags, blah, blah, blah. But they're to blame as well, are they not? I mean, they are a decision-making entity in the process here, and they could have said no.
That is very true. So, you know, the system of governance we have here in Ghana is also problematic in the sense that if you have majority in parliament, they bully their way through. So that is precisely what is said to have happened. That's notwithstanding, we believe that the opposition is powerful enough to stop such deals if they really believe that it wasn't a good deal.
But even members of the majority are saying we didn't like it. We smelt a rat.
Exactly.
You know,
so how then did it go through?
K.T. Hammond.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then how then did it, how did it go through, you know? And Parliament must also, you know, collaborate with other entities like, you know, civil society to push the agenda through. So this whole thing about we said it, if this is going to happen for a long time and the only excuse is we have majority in parliament, then we have no hope as a country. There has to be a way out. So parliamentarians cannot use even though majority, the tyranny of the majority is a reality in parliament, that shouldn't be an excuse, you know, for the minority groups to, you know,
quietly acquiesce to the wrong thing.
Well, they didn't quietly acquiesce. They made noise about it, but then to allow this to go through is quite an unfortunate situation within parliament.
Right. Okay. Now, help me understand what's going to happen now administratively. Now that PDS is supposed to be sort of out of the picture temporarily, the contract has been suspended, but all of the ECG staff who work in the distribution, you know, sector, well, most of them were moved to PDS as PDS staff. So right now that PDS the contract has been suspended, their staff, how do they end up working back for ECG again? I mean, what's going to happen? Will PDS have to let them go in order for ECG to employ them? Or will ECG contract? I mean, you get the question here?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, what happens at this point?
Yeah, this is a very complicated thing to discuss, you know, and I don't want to assume that I know everything about it. But on the surface, what happened was that the only thing that changed was management of the distribution sector. It used to be ECG, and then we brought in PDS. Everything else was the same in terms of the assets, in terms of the staff, in terms of everything. So it was just a switch in the name.
Yes.
And therefore the brains and everything, right? But the people are the same people who delivered under ECG. They are the same people delivering under PDS. Yeah. So in terms of things going on, like electricity distribution going on, normal business, it's going to be normal business.
That's the part that I'm confused about, because I'm putting myself in the shoes of an employee, former employee of ECG. On March, what was the date when the concession began?
That was in March, but I don't really...
So in March, I woke up one morning and I had to now become an employee of PDS. So obviously, I would have signed new contracts and everything to become an employee of PDS. Because you remember that there were some conditions for that transfer of employment. At first, it was going to be for 5 years, and then there was a renegotiation. And, so there are new terms under which I am now employed by PDS. Still doing the same job, but new employer, new terms. Okay. Now my employer's contract has been cancelled. Oh, no, sorry, has been suspended. So my employer no longer is responsible for the distribution sector. Am I now an employee of ECG, or am I still an employee of PDS? And what is the relation? Who is paying my salary? You follow? And what's the relationship with PDS and ECG? Does that mean PDS is still in the picture, or what?
So I like the point you made about who is paying my salary. So in law, especially in the law of torts, to be specific, there is a definition for who an employee is, who an employee. So unless we establish that that definition in law is exactly what is in fact between ECG, between former staff of ECG and former staff of ECG, for want of better, then we can move on to concluding whether they are indeed staff of PDS or not. Okay. So your employer must provide you with all the necessary equipment, must also ensure that people who come on board are of the right technical capacity. And also the employer must ensure that, the employer basically controls you. So who controls the staff of the current PDS? Or who controls the staff of former ECG? That is a fundamental question that needs to be settled before we can make the conclusions as to whether or not people are still staff of ECG or PDS. So for that, I'd like to please recuse on that.
Fair enough. I think we need some clarity on that from those who are now responsible for the process. But let's talk about government's posture here. Because in your statement, you pointed fingers, at all the institutions along the line who you believe have contributed to this situation. And you pointed out the seriousness of it, talked about how much money is collected by PDS on a monthly basis and how much of our assets are at risk because of what is happening and so forth. But what do you say about the posture of government here? They are the ones who unveiled this, uncovered it to the nation. Okay, we didn't know this was happening. They issued a statement telling us that this has happened and that they have had to suspend the deal. But they are also saying that they should be given credit for discovering it. Does ASEP see it that way? So,
first of all, for us, we believe that once this issue has been unraveled and government has taken steps, that is the right thing to do. It is the normal thing to do. So I don't see where the credit is coming from. Government is doing what it is expected to do. So that is where I'll end. Okay. But then when you look at the whole arrangement and how the processes, the contracting processes happened, we had MIDA being on the side of government, set up by an act of parliament to implement this project under the MCC, right? We also have IFC which is the financial advisor to government with all its expertise to ensure that issues like this don't come up. As a financial advisor, you are supposed to look into details of what is happening, I mean, the document in front of you, verify and let governments know that this particular document probably is fraud. You should be able to detect certain things with all your expertise. So we expected such an advice from IFC, which they failed to provide, clearly, given what we are seeing now. Right. And then we also had Parliament. There was a joint committee on finance and energy. We are also part of this whole process, right? So when we talk about government, you are basically talking about MIDA and Parliament on the one hand. And when we talk about the other parties, we talk about IFC. And then we also talk about PDS with Morocco and the local partners, specifically as the constituents of PDS. Right. So each party has had a role to play right from the beginning. And you see, government is, I think government is having this posture because they feel like from the beginning, this whole project was entered in good faith. That's a fundamental principle when countries enter into agreement with other parties, be it other countries or companies, right? You go in good faith, hoping or knowing that the other party is bringing in the correct documents that they are supposed to bring. So there is a presumption of regularity on the side of Ghana that whatever PDS presented to us was indeed valid, right? But then beyond the presumption of regularity, given the nature of the transaction and the extent of assets involved, the transaction itself is a $4 billion transaction. Right. And assets of ECG that we are talking about, which were leased to PDS, is around $18 billion. So these are no mean assets that you cannot, you cannot ignore, doing your due diligence right from the start. And considering that this requirement for a guarantee goes to the root of the agreement, one would think that governments would right from the start confirm the validity of all these things, despite that we have a presumption of regularity. We needed to go the extra step, So MIDA was supposed to help us do that. Finance Committee, the Joint Committee on Finance and Energy of Parliament was supposed to help us do that. The Minister of Finance, of course, and Minister of Energy, they are all on the board of MIDA. They were supposed to do that. IFC was supposed to help us to establish that. So this is not even a question of we are condition precedent and condition whatever. From the beginning, this issue about the guarantee should have been something that could have been cross-checked and ensure that it was valid. Because it's fundamental to the agreement.
Right, Pauline, we'll talk a bit more about this. But first, if we can do two things. First of all, let's find the statement issued by PDS in response to all this. We'll read that and analyze it in a moment. But before that, Katie Hammond, majority member of Parliament, says that government press-ganged them into, passing this thing without proper scrutiny. Let's hear what he said, and then when we come back, we'll analyze that PDS response.
Very unhappy with the way. There are other things that we've known about the challenges ECG is faced, even with their new status, with respect to collecting the money from PDS and the extent to which PDS has been an impediment. You can hear from the way I'm going on that I have not been the chairman of their fan club. I simply can't handle the way the PDS thing had gone about. They're taking this whole thing away from ECG, national assets. So I haven't been happy.
So now that government says that they suspended the
so to the credit of government, you see, I think you're saying that we looked on. We didn't just look on. No, we made all these points. Now, to the credit of government took these matters into account, went on to, I wouldn't say on the frolic, but really zoomed in, I think, on the concerns raised by us, to the extent that now it has come out that these guys have perpetuated a gigantic fraud on the people of Ghana. That's the announcement. That's to the credit of government. The government didn't sit down unconcerned. Parliament didn't sit down unconcerned. We put our efforts together, invited the authorities to examine the concerns. Some of the issues that are raised, particularly the capital input, particularly the guarantees and everything, the backstops that they had provided. Now we understand that government has done exactly that, and that is what has come up. And it is now been suspended. Is it abrogated or suspended?
It's suspended.
Well, it's suspended. Legally, it is fair. I mean, I think they got to suspend, investigate all these things, and then, of course, but I think they are going to abrogate it. But it shouldn't end there. If it is proved that indeed this group perpetuated what I call a gargantuan fraud, illegality on the state of Ghana, then people must be arrested, people must be prosecuted, and of course, when it comes to prosecution, you leave it at that. The court will decide what then to do. Right. We wouldn't want a situation where this matter is brushed under the carpet. No. I mean, our committee wouldn't accept that. There must be a very serious investigation.
Yeah, Katie Hammond there, describing what has happened as gigantic fraud. Perpetrated on the people of Ghana, people of Ghana represented in this deal by him and his colleagues in Parliament. Okay, now we're going to read that PDS statement, but first I've just received some information from some colleagues of mine in the human resources sector, and they are giving some clarity to the whole PDS employment thing. Well, clarity, I suppose. So this says, I am informed that about 6,000 workers were rolled into PDS employment and payroll with the same terms and conditions of employment without any variation. It is also reported that 120 workers remained with ECG under the circumstances. If following the suspension, PDS gets terminated after the probe, then the 6,000 employees will have to be reverted back to ECG's employment and payroll. The workers will have to be served letters of law notifying them of their employment with ECG in the event PDS gets terminated. And thank you for that. But I guess the question still remains, what is the arrangement during the suspension of the contract? Who do the workers work for? If PDS contract has been suspended, then how can PDS workers be working in the distribution sector?
Well, suspension is not cancellation.
Yes, but they're still working. The workers are still working. Yeah. So what will that mean? Who will pay them? What's the arrangement between government and PDS during that time?
So I'm going to rely on what you just read from your colleague, right? Yes. There are over 6,000 workers under PDS, correct? And the contract has not been cancelled. It has been suspended. And Energy Commission released a statement yesterday regarding who should take over management temporarily, that is ECG. Right. So in our current state, ECG is just managing as a temporary intervention, right? But then the employees of PDS are still employees of PDS because this contract has not been cancelled, it's been suspended. So
that means PDS is still functioning in the value chain. They are still running the distribution, or their employees are still...
The people behind the distribution, those who are doing their technical work, are still doing their technical work.
Those who are doing the collection of money.
They are still doing, but under the management of ECG.
Yes.
That is my understanding of what is happening currently.
But,
so PDS
but they are still
management...
PDS employees.
Yeah, they are still PDS employees from what you have read from your colleague. But still, I don't want anybody to take this as a
It's important to state that we have not independently verified what I just read. This is
a view,
an expert in the field who is expressing what he believes to be the situation. But we have not independently verified that. All right, well, let's read PDS's response to this, statement from the government of Ghana that was issued on Tuesday night. So it's addressed to all media houses, and it's headed PDS response to suspension. PDS has taken note of the statement issued by government through the Ministry of Information on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, acting for and on behalf of Government of Ghana and the Electricity Company of Ghana. PDS wishes to state for the record that it has always acted and will continue to act in good faith at all times. PDS will go through due process by complying with the terms of the transaction agreements executed between it and ECG on one hand and Government of Ghana through Ministry of Finance on the other hand. PDS also wishes to assure the Ghanaian public that it will not rush to put out any information until it has been sufficiently substantiated in the interest of safeguarding the transaction and the image of Ghana. So let's have a look at these last two paragraphs, Pauline. Let's do a bit of analysis. Okay, so the first of these last two says that PDS will go through due process with the by complying with the terms of the transaction agreements executed between it and ECG and government of Ghana. So they are saying that they will comply with the terms of the transaction agreement. What does that mean? Does that mean that they will continue to act as if they are in contract with ECG and government of Ghana? Is that what it means?
On face value, that is how I understand it to, what I understand it to mean, because there is an agreement, and the terms of the agreement now establishes the legal relationship between the parties, right? And one of the terms of the agreement is for PDS to invest like over $500 million
yes.
in infrastructure, etc., during the first 5 years. So for PDS to say they would comply with the terms of the agreement is basically, for me, saying despite the suspension, they'll keep doing what they were contracted to do unless probably it is abrogated.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, but then also we have, so we saw a statement from Energy Commission saying the whole management of this whole thing is given to ECG. So the question is, how is ECG collaborating with PDS within this suspension period to ensure that the terms of the contract are still carried out, so that Ghanaians are not affected in any way? Right. So that's an important question that you know, the parties involved must resolve.
But Pauline, the terms of the contract also include PDS basically running the distribution sector, collecting monies. At some point, as Raymond pointed out, we were collecting over 150 million cedis a month. Yes. You know, so that is all part of the agreement.
So like I said, now ECG is appointed to do all of that.
Right.
So it is now in the hands of ECG to do what PDS was doing.
But PDS says they are going to continue.
This statement was released the day before yesterday, I guess.
No, yesterday.
Yesterday?
So, yes.
Okay, so the Energy Commission statement appointing ECG came in yesterday evening.
Okay.
So it is after this. So,
right. So it
looking at the time, yeah, so...
Right, now let's look at the final paragraph, and this is the one that really had me scratching my head. PDS also wishes to assure the Ghanaian public that it will not rush to put out any information until it has been sufficiently substantiated in the interest of safeguarding the transaction and the image of Ghana. Pauline, is PDS telling us that they have some information that could tarnish the image of Ghana? And that they are promising not to put it out in haste?
No, I don't think that is what they are saying here, right? For me, let's focus on the subject matter for which we are all here at this point. It is about a bond, an insurance bond that has been alleged to have been fraudulently procured, right? And there are different parties involved in this whole case: Ghana, PDS, and Al-Qut, right? Now, the question about misrepresentation, fraudulent misrepresentation, is what I believe PDS is talking about here. We are saying they have they have procured a false document, right? They are also saying they will not put out any statements unless they have done their checks and have sufficiently established that this is indeed fraudulent.
Okay.
So what they are saying undertone is that they are probably innocent, right? And that they would also want to establish from their side. Remember from the beginning I mentioned that this transaction is a transaction in good faith. So it's possible that between PDS and Al-Qut, PDS believed that they had the documents, the correct documents, then the correct signature. And it's possible that within Al-Qut, somebody on their own did whatever they were supposed to do when PDS requested for an insurance. It could also be that PDS itself procured the fraudulent signature. So this whole thing is complicated, and we cannot make the fact is that the document, the signature on the document was procured fraudulently. That is it. But imputing responsibility on who is something that we have to wait for the process to establish.
Okay.
Because there are different kinds of misrepresentation. First, let me explain what a representation is. A representation is well spoken to another person you want to enter into a transaction with the hope of getting the person to enter into that transaction. Therefore, when you make a representation, it means that the statements you have made to the person to lure the person into the transaction is probably not true, right? It's not true, that is the fact. But then there are different forms of misrepresentation. There's fraudulent misrepresentation, where the person making a statement knows that what the statement he's making is false and has no cause to believe that it is true. There's also innocent misrepresentation, where you say what you are saying to the other person, which is not true, but you in your capacity believes that it is completely true. And there's also negligent misrepresentation, where you carelessly make a statement without checking whether or not it is true. So within the context of PDS, let's just put PDS under one of these misrepresentation that we are talking about. They probably procure the document and give it to government believing that it was correct. That would be innocent representation. It has a different implication in law compared to fraudulent misrepresentation, right? So let's allow government to do the investigation and establish that there was indeed fraudulent misrepresentation. Then the contract can be repudiated. Okay,
there's something interesting that has just occurred to me. Now, throughout the process that led to the concession, government was government and MEDA were very much interested in doing all they can to make it possible for PDS to take up the concession. They were supportive. First, PDS was supposed to provide guarantees from a bank, an AA1 rated bank. That seemed problematic. They were willing to be flexible and say, okay, an insurance company will do. There were some conditions precedent that it appeared PDS was struggling to meet before the time was up. This is according to the energy minister. They again were flexible and turned them from conditions precedent to conditions subsequent. MEDA did this. So there was a certain desire to be supportive so that this deal can happen. Do you see that that desire has suddenly changed? Because you have done some great analysis here that there are different types of misrepresentation. In one possible scenario, this could all be a simple administrative error where there actually is a guarantee from this company, just that the wrong person signed it and, you know, forged the signature. That person has been dealt with, however, the guarantee still exists. That is a possibility. But it doesn't seem like the government of Ghana is inclined to that possibility. It seems they are more inclined to the possibility of fraud. We've actually heard K.T. Hammond say, I mean, he was categorical, saying that a fraud has been perpetrated on the people of Ghana. Do you see a change in narrative here, and what do you think might have caused this?
Let me explain this again. Okay, so the issue of fraud would have to fall at the feet of somebody, right? It is either at the feet of PDS or at the feet of Alkut.
Yeah.
But so far we have heard the Alkut people say this signature that has been procured was wrongfully procured, and therefore they know nothing about the project, about the guarantee, the insurance bond. They know nothing about it. So from Alkut's perspective, PDS has not procured any guarantee from them. So it means that there is no guarantee at all, and that is regardless of whether or not PDS innocently misrepresented the guarantee document to government.
Right.
So as we stand now, on the surface of it, because we are still establishing the fact, but on the surface of it, it looks like we don't have any insurance bond at the moment.
Right.
But bank guarantee is fundamental to this whole thing.
That's interesting. So it's not that, you know, the wrong person signed, but, you know, there actually is a bond. Basically, there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee.
There's no guarantee because the company that is supposed to be the insurer is saying that the signature that is on the document that is saying they as an insurer is giving that guarantee is fraudulent. So on their part, they don't see any, there is no agreement between them and PDS regarding, so this collapsed from the beginning, you know, the whole.
Let's look at the way forward. What is ASEP's advice here. There's an investigation, but who do you think should be investigated, first of all? And what are the outcomes, what are the best possible outcomes for Ghana out of this?
So from the beginning, I mentioned that there are certain stakeholders involved. MIDA working on behalf of government. We have IFC also in the system. And then we also have the parliament with the Joint Committee on Finance and Energy. Yeah. So these are people who were involved from the beginning. If there is any investigation that is going on, which indeed is happening, they have to be investigated as well. All the people that were involved right from the beginning to this point should be investigated. But we've mentioned in our statement that investigating is not enough, right? Make sure that government should make sure that all these key players are set aside. MIDA leaders who are involved should be suspended so that they don't intercept evidence, or they don't block evidence. Intercept is probably the wrong word, but we don't want any obstruction.
Or cover
exactly,
evidence.
Obstruction of evidence to support government's investigation.
Okay.
All these people must be. But the other thing is also that IFC, which feel that a financial advisor in this sense, must also not be consulted in any way regarding this whole process, because they have proven incompetent in our opinion, right? And then there are parties in PDS who are supposed to be local partners, who we did not know from the beginning, and who must take responsibility at this point, because regarding the bank guarantee, because as a local partner, as I mentioned earlier, you are supposed to put forward 51% of whatever you are guaranteeing. So you work together with Miracle to secure the guarantee. So we shouldn't leave them out in this whole process, right? PDS comprises of Miracle and 2 other local partners. These people, all these 3 people, I mean, especially the local partners, must be investigated. We still don't know who are behind the companies that are the local partners. That is something that we have to find out first. Government must establish that first and then deal with those people accordingly.
All right, wonderful. I want to thank you. Pauline Anaman, of course, is the head of the policy unit at the Africa Center for Energy Policy. We appreciate your time with us this morning. Right now, about 61 CSOs want government to pass the Affirmative Action Bill in 2 weeks. Roland Walker will be interacting with some members of that group right after this.